My father's illness should have reunited us, but the call from my mother wasn't about reconciliation. It was a demand for money. They had drained their life savings on my siblings, and now they expected me to pay the price for their favoritism. This is where the cracks in the family foundation finally gave way, and trust me, you'll want to see what I uncovered. If you're new here, please subscribe to follow the story. We love hearing from you. What city are you tuning in from today? The migraine had been building for 3 days, a relentless, throbbing pressure behind my left eye that made the fluorescent lights of my office feel like physical assaults. I was 34 years old, the senior operations director for a logistics firm that handled shipping lanes across 3 continents, and I was currently lying on the floor of my home office, pressing a bag of frozen peas against my forehead. I had just closed the biggest contract of my career, a deal that secured my promotion and a significant bonus, but instead of celebrating, I was incapacitated. My body had a way of keeping score, reminding me that working 80-hour weeks to prove my worth eventually came with a bill. The silence of my apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt heavy. I lived alone in a penthouse overlooking the city, a tangible symbol of everything I had built from scratch. There was no safety net here, no family inheritance, just the cold, hard equity of sleepless nights and skipped meals. When my phone buzzed against the hardwood floor, the sound was like a drill to my temple. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. I groaned, peeling the bag of peas off my face and squinting at the screen. The name flashing there made my stomach turn over, a nausea distinct from the migraine. Mother. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since the Christmas argument where I finally drew the line in the sand. Seeing her name didn't bring a wave of nostalgia or warmth. It brought a spike of adrenaline, the fight-or-flight response of a cornered animal. I debated letting it go to voicemail. I should have let it go to voicemail. But the persistent buzzing felt like an emergency alarm. Against my better judgment, I slid my thumb across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. Hello, my voice was raspy, weak. Eva. There was no greeting. No, how are you? No, it's been too long. Just my name, spoken with that familiar, clipped tone Susan used when she was inconvenienced. Mother, I said, sitting up slowly, the room spinning slightly. What is it? It's your father, she said, her voice devoid of the frantic energy I expected. Instead, she sounded annoyed, as if his mortality was a personal affront to her schedule. Robert collapsed this morning. He's in the ICU. It's his heart. The doctors say he needs a valve replacement and a bypass immediately, or he won't make it through the week. The air left my lungs. Despite everything, despite the distance, the coldness, the years of neglect, Robert was still my father. The image of him, strong and stubborn, suddenly hooked up to machines, sent a shockwave of grief through me that I wasn't prepared for. Oh my God, I whispered, the migraine forgotten for a split second. Is he conscious? I can be on a flight tonight. I can be there by morning. We don't need you to fly here, Eva, Susan cut in, her tone sharp. We have enough people in the waiting room. Michael is here. Mila is here. We don't need a crowd. I froze. My brother and sister were there. Of course they were. They were always there. Then why did you call? I asked, the old bitterness seeping into my tone. Because the insurance is refusing to cover the specific specialist Robert needs, she said, the words coming out fast now, rehearsed. We need to put down a deposit for the surgery and the post-op care facility. We need $50,000, Eva, today. I closed my eyes, the pain behind them flaring up with renewed vengeance. You're asking me for $50,000. We are asking family for help, she corrected, her voice taking on that self-righteous edge I knew so well. Your father is dying. Unless, of course, your job is more important than his life, we know you have it. We know you're doing well. She said well like it was a dirty word, like my success was an insult to them. I gripped the phone tighter. I haven't spoken to you in years, and the first thing you say is a demand for a check. Don't be dramatic, Eva, she snapped. This is life or death. Are you going to help save your father, or are you going to let him die because you're still holding onto some petty grudge? The manipulation was seamless. Instant. It was a master class in guilt, designed to bypass my logic and strike directly at the terrified daughter inside me. But as I sat there on my cold floor, listening to the woman who had once told me I was on my own the day I turned 18, I realized something terrifying. The betrayal wasn't that she asked for money. The betrayal was that she assumed I was still the same desperate little girl who would buy their love at any price. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I told her I needed an hour to move funds around, a lie to buy myself time to breathe. "Don't take too long," Susan warned. "The billing department closes at 5. Then she hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I slowly lowered the phone, my hand trembling. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawling city skyline. It was gray and rainy, matching the turmoil churning in my gut. $50,000. I had it. That was the irony. I had it sitting in a liquid savings account I called my Freedom Fund. It was money I had hoarded like a dragon, a psychological buffer against ever being poor again. Sending it would be painful, but it wouldn't bankrupt me. But it wasn't about the math. It was about the principle. My mind drifted back to the last time I had asked them for help. I was 22, freshly graduated, and my car, a rusted bucket of bolts I'd bought for $500, had died on the side of the highway. I needed $600 for a new transmission so I could get to my first real job interview. I had called Robert. "We can't just hand you money, Eva," he had said, his voice stern, lecturing. "It builds character to solve your own problems. If we bail you out, you'll never learn the value of a dollar. Take the bus. Walk, figure it out." I had walked. I walked 5 miles in the rain to that interview, my cheap suit soaked through. I didn't get the job. 2 weeks later, I came home for a mandatory family dinner to find a brand new convertible sitting in the driveway with a red bow on it. It was for Mila's 20th birthday. "She needs a safe way to get to her sorority meetings." Susan had beamed, sipping wine while I stared at the chrome bumper, feeling something inside me shatter. That was the dynamic. That was the rule. Eva works, Eva struggles, Eva figures it out. Michael and Mila receive. Now, years later, the dynamic hadn't changed, only the direction of the cash flow. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands shaking. Why did they need money? Robert had worked as a mid-level manager at a manufacturing plant for 40 years. He had a pension. Susan had inherited a small but decent sum from her aunt 5 years ago. They lived in a paid-off house in a low-cost-of-living area. They should have had savings. They should have had Medicare. Why is the insurance denying it? I asked the empty room. I picked up my phone again, but not to call Susan. I opened my banking app, staring at the balance. Then I opened my email. I had an old contact, a forensic accountant named David I had used for vetting potential vendors at work. He wasn't a private investigator, but he could find out if a business, or a person, was financially viable in about 10 minutes. I hesitated. Invading my parents' financial privacy felt dirty. It felt like a violation. But asking me for $50,000 out of the blue was a violation, too. I typed out a quick message to David. "Need a favor. Can you run a quick asset check on these 2 names? I need to know if there are any liens, bankruptcies, or major judgments. It's a family matter." I hit send. Then I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. The lines around my eyes were deeper than I remembered. I had sacrificed relationships, sleep, and my 20s to build this life. I did it because I had no choice. My phone chimed with a text message from Susan. "Doctor is asking for the confirmation number for the transfer. Michael is crying. Please don't do this to us." Michael is crying. The image of my 38-year-old brother crying in a hospital waiting room made me scoff out loud. Michael didn't cry for anyone but himself. If Michael was crying, it was because he was afraid the ATM, me, wasn't going to dispense the cash. I stared at the text, and a cold realization settled over me. They weren't just asking for help. They were panicking. This wasn't the panic of grief. I knew what that looked like. This was the panic of people who had been caught in a lie. I replied, "I need the hospital's direct billing number. I will pay them directly. I am not wiring cash to your personal account." The response was immediate. The 3 dots bubbled for a long time, then disappeared, then bubbled again. "They don't take over-the-phone payments for deposits like this due to fraud. You have to send it to us, and we will write the check. Hurry, Eva." A lie, a blatant, clumsy lie. Hospitals took payments from anyone willing to give them a credit card number. I narrowed my eyes at my reflection. My parents had taught me to be self-sufficient, to be tough, to be skeptical. They had forged me in fire, hoping I would burn, but instead, I had come out a day of steel. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I whispered to the empty bathroom. I know how to count. To understand why that text message made my blood run cold, you have to understand Michael and Mila. Michael was the firstborn, the prince. He was 38 now, but in his mind, he was a misunderstood billionaire in waiting. He had founded 6 companies in the last 10 years. There was the app that was going to replace Uber. It didn't exist. The organic dog food line, he bought generic kibble and repackaged it. And the cryptocurrency consulting firm, a pyramid scheme. Every single one of these ventures required seed capital. And every single time, Robert and Susan wrote the check. "He's a visionary," Susan would tell me when I pointed out that Michael was 30 and still living in their basement. "Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college, Eva. You have to spend money to make money." Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at a diner to pay for my textbooks. I remember one Christmas, I came home with gifts I had bought with my tips, nice scarves for Mom, a watch for Dad. Michael gave them a prototype of his new energy drink, which was just Gatorade mixed with caffeine powder. They raved about the drink. They barely looked at the scarves. Then there was Mila, the baby. Mila was 30, beautiful, and completely helpless. She had never held a job for longer than 3 months. She had anxiety that prevented her from working, but curiously, it never prevented her from going to music festivals, traveling to Chelum, or dating aspiring DJs. My parents paid her rent. They paid her car lease. They paid her phone bill. When I confronted Robert about this once, asking why Mila got a free ride while I was told to figure it out, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mila is sensitive. She's fragile. You're strong, Eva. You don't need us like she does." It was a compliment wrapped in a curse. Because I was strong, I was invisible. Because I didn't need them, I didn't matter. I had accepted that role. I had moved out, changed my number, and built a fortress of solitude around my life. I thought I was safe. But now, staring at my phone, the old anger surged up, hot and suffocating. My computer pinged. It was David. That was fast, I thought. I sat down at my desk and opened the email. Subject, preliminary asset search, Robert and Susan. "Eva, I can't do a full deep dive without authorization forms, but public records are public for a reason. Here, what I found in 5 minutes. 1. Primary residence, sold 6 months ago, title transfer to an LLC named Prestige Ventures. 2. Second mortgage, taken out on the property 2 years prior to the sale. Full equity stripped. 3. Liens, 3 separate tax liens against Robert for unpaid property taxes. 4 civil judgments, 1 pending lawsuit against a Michael last name, listing Robert as a guarantor for a business loan of $150,000. Eva, on paper, your parents don't just have 0 assets. They are significantly underwater. They don't own that house anymore. It looks like they might be renting it back from the LLC. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. Sold the house? They sold the house I grew up in, the house Robert swore he would die in, and Prestige Ventures. That sounded exactly like one of Michael's shell companies. I looked at the date of the sale, 6 months ago. I looked at the date of the second mortgage. 2 years ago, right around the time Michael launched his dropshipping business. The pieces slammed together in my mind. They hadn't just given my siblings an allowance. They had liquidated their entire existence. They had mortgaged their golden years to fund Michael's delusions and Mila's lifestyle. And now that the well was dry and Robert was actually sick, they were coming to the only person left with a positive bank balance. Me. My phone rang again. It wasn't Susan this time. The caller ID said Michael. I hadn't heard his voice in 3 years. I took a deep breath, pressing the phone to my ear. "Hello, Michael," I said, my voice icy calm. "Eva," he breathed, sounding frantic, breathless. "Mom says you're stalling. You can't stall, okay? Dad he's really bad. You need to send the money. Now." I told Mom I'd pay the hospital directly, I said, testing him. "You can't," he shouted too quickly. "I told you the billing department it's a mess. They need a certified check from the family. Look, I'm trying to handle everything here. I'm dealing with the doctors, I'm dealing with Mom, and I just need you to do this one thing. Just be a sister for once in your life, Eva. God, why do you always have to make everything about you?" "Make it about me," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "You're asking for 50 grand, Michael." "It's for Dad," he screamed. "Don't you care if he dies? Are you that heartless? After everything they did for you." "Everything they did for me," I echoed. "Right. I just sen. D the wire, Eva. Stop being a bitch and save your father." He hung up. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. He was terrified. He wasn't scared for Dad. He was scared because the money wasn't for the hospital. If I sent that money to my parents' account, Michael would have it in his pocket within 10 minutes. I stood up. The migraine was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't going to send the money, but I wasn't going to stay home either. I walked to my bedroom and pulled my suitcase out of the closet. I threw in 2 suits, my laptop, and a folder of documents. "You want me to be a sister, Michael," I said to the empty room as I zipped the bag shut. "Careful what you wish for." I booked a first-class ticket for a flight leaving in 3 hours. I wasn't going there to pay a bill. I was going there to audit the books. The flight was a blur of spreadsheets and old emails. I spent the 5 hours in the air building a timeline of my family's financial destruction. I pulled every public record David had flagged, cross-referencing dates with Michael's social media posts. July 2024, second mortgage taken out. July 2024, Michael posts a photo of himself in a new BMW with the caption, "Grind never stops." January 2025, $20,000 withdrawal from my parents' joint account, based on a slip Susan had accidentally emailed me in a forwarded chain. January 2025, Mila posts photos from a month-long wellness retreat in Bali. It was nauseating. It was systematic predation, and my parents had been willing participants. I landed at 10:00 p.m. and rented a car. The drive to the hospital took 40 minutes. The city hadn't changed, but it felt smaller, grayer. The hospital was a hulking concrete block on the edge of town, bathed in harsh orange streetlights. I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in the rental car and called the hospital's main line. "Billing department," I requested. "Billing is closed for the night, ma'am," the operator said. "But if this is an emergency admission, the on-call financial counselor can help." "Yes," I said. "My father, Robert last name, was admitted today. I'm his daughter. I was told there's a $50,000 deposit required for his surgery immediately because of an insurance issue." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "One moment, please." I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Ma'am," the voice returned, sounding confused. "Mr. Last Name is admitted, yes. He is scheduled for a bypass tomorrow, but I'm looking at his file. His insurance authorized the procedure this afternoon. There is a deductible of $3,000, but there is absolutely no record of a $50,000 deposit requirement. We don't even operate that way." I closed my eyes. The relief was instantly eclipsed by a rage so pure it felt like white heat. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That's all I needed to know." I hung up. They weren't just asking me to pay for Dad. They were using Dad's dying heart as a fundraising campaign for Michael. I got out of the car. The night air was cold. I smoothed down my blazer, grabbed my bag, and walked into the lobby. I didn't look like the scared 20-year-old who had left this town. I looked like what I was, a woman who negotiated million-dollar contracts for breakfast. I found them in the surgical waiting room on the 4th floor. It was a tableau of dysfunction. Susan was sitting in a chair, weeping into a tissue. Mila was next to her, scrolling on her phone, looking bored, and Michael was pacing, talking rapidly into his cell phone, his hand gesturing wildly. "I'm telling you, the funds are coming," Michael was saying into the phone. "Tomorrow morning, yes, don't liquidate the position yet, just hold on." He spun around and saw me. He froze, the phone slowly lowered from his ear. "Eva," he said. Susan looked up, her eyes red. "Eva, you came." "I thought you said we didn't need a crowd," I said, my voice cutting through the sterile air like a knife. I didn't hug them. I didn't move toward them. I stood 10 feet away, a statue of judgment. "We needed the money, Eva," Michael snapped, recovering his composure. He shoved his phone into his pocket. "Did you bring it? The hospital is threatening to cancel the surgery." "Really?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because I just got off the phone with billing. They said the surgery is approved. The deductible is $3,000, so I'm curious, Michael, what's the other $47,000 for?" The silence that descended on the waiting room was heavy enough to crush bones. Susan blinked, looking from me to Michael. What are you talking about?" Michael said. "Michael lied," I said, taking a step forward. I kept my eyes locked on my brother. He was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead. "Michael needs $50,000, but it's not for Dad's heart. Who was that on the phone, Michael? Your bookie or a loan shark?" "You don't know what you Ray talking about," Michael hissed, stepping into my personal space. He tried to use his height to intimidate me, a tactic that used to work when we were kids. "The insurance is complicated. There are out-of-network fees, anesthesia costs." "Stop," I said. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket, the notes from my conversation with the billing department. "I have the authorization code right here. Authorization number 8894 Bravo. Approved. Full coverage minus deductible." I turned to Susan. She looked small, shrunken. "He lied to you, Mom. He told you Dad was going to die unless I sent money, didn't he? He worked you up into a panic so you would make the call." "Michael," Susan's voice was trembling, "is that true?" "She's trying to confuse you," Michael shouted, waving his hands. "She's always been jealous. She wants to ruin this family. Dad is dying in there and she's talking about billing codes." "Dad is dying," I agreed, "and you're using his deathbed to run a scam." "I am an entrepreneur," Michael screamed. "I have cash flow issues. It's temporary. I was going to pay it back." "Pay it back?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Like you paid back the second mortgage? Like you paid back the business loan Dad co-signed? The one he's being sued for right now." Susan gasped. "Sued? What lawsuit?" Michael's face went pale. How do you know about that?" "I know everything," I lied. I didn't know everything, not yet, but I knew enough to bluff. "I know about Prestige Ventures. I know the house is gone." "The house isn't gone," Mila piped up from the corner, finally looking up from her phone. "Mom and Dad still live there." "They live there as tenants, Mila," I said, turning my gaze to my sister. "They sold the title 6 months ago to an LLC. Let me guess. Michael is the managing partner of Prestige Ventures." Mila looked at Michael, confused. "But you said that was an asset protection strategy." "It's an asset stripping strategy," I said. "He sold the house out from under them, took the cash, and is now renting it back to them using their own pension money." Susan stood up, her legs shaking. She walked over to Michael and grabbed his arm. "Michael, tell me she's lying. Tell me we still own the house." Michael yanked his arm away. It's complicated, Mom. You don't understand finance. I did it to save us from taxes. I'm trying to build an empire for this family, and all you do is question me. Where is the money, Michael? Susan whispered. The money from the house sale. It was $300,000. It's invested, Michael yelled. It's tied up in inventory. In crypto, it's going to triple by next year. So it's gone, I translated. It's gone, and now you're in a hole, and you tried to use Dad's heart attack to trick me into filling it. Michael sneered at me, his face twisting into something ugly. You think you're so smart, don't you? Miss High-End Mighty Operations Director, you have millions sitting in the bank and you won't even help your own blood. You're the monster here, Eva, not me. I'm the only one here paying for this surgery, I said calmly. I walked past him to the nurse's station. I'm Eva, Robert's daughter. I'd like to pay the deductible. Here is my card. As I handed the card over, I heard Susan sobbing behind me. It wasn't the soft cry of grief anymore. It was the wail of a woman realizing her golden boy had just set her life on fire. I paid the $3,000. I also paid for a private room upgrade for Dad, just to make a point. I wanted them to see exactly what my money could do when it wasn't being stolen. The next morning, Robert's surgery was successful. He was in the ICU, sedated but stable. I sat in the cafeteria with Susan. She looked 10 years older than she had yesterday. Her hands were wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee. He sold the house, she asked quietly. He really sold it. I pulled the deed this morning, I said, sliding a printed document across the table. He had you sign the papers, Mom. Power of attorney, remember. He said it was to refinance for a lower rate, she stammered. He brought a notary to the house. I didn't read it. I trusted him. And the lawsuit. A loan he took out 3 years ago. He defaulted. Dad is the guarantor. If they win, they can garnish Dad's pension, which is the only income you have left since the savings are gone. Susan put her head in her hands. We have nothing, after 40 years. You have nothing, I confirmed brutally, because you gave it all to him. We just wanted to help him, she sobbed. He has such big dreams, he just needed a break. He didn't need a break, Mom. He needed a job, and you never made him get one. Just then my phone buzzed. It was David again. Eva, you need to see this. I dug deeper into Prestige Ventures. It's not just the house. He opened credit cards in your father's name, and yours. My blood froze. Mine. 3 cards, opened 4 years ago. The statements go to a PO box in your hometown. Balance is maxed out. Total debt, $45,000. It's in collections, but because he used an old address, you probably never got the notices. I stared at the phone. The migraine threatened to return. Identity theft. He hadn't just robbed them. He had robbed me. He had used my social security number, which he probably found in old tax documents at my parents' house, to fund his life. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a felony. I looked up at Susan. Where is Michael? He went home to shower, she said weakly. He said he'd be back for lunch. Good, I said, standing up. I'm going to make a phone call, and then I'm going to the police station. Police? Susan looked up terrified. Eva, no, you can't. He's your brother. He's a criminal, I said. He stole my identity. He stole your house. And yesterday, he tried to defraud me of 50 grand. Please, she begged, grabbing my hand. We can fix this. He can pay it back. Don't ruin his life. I looked down at her hand. It was the same hand that had signed the checks for his cars while I walked to work. The same hand that had waved me away when I asked for help. I'm not ruining his life, Mom, I said, pulling my hand away. I'm letting him experience the one thing you never gave him. What? She whispered. Consequences. I walked away. I called David. Send me the proofs of the credit cards, the signatures, everything. Then I called the local precinct. I'd like to report a case of identity theft and elder financial abuse. Yes, I have documentation. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I was done playing the savior. It was time to play the executioner. The detective, a man named Miller with tired eyes and a suit that had seen better days, looked over the stack of documents I had printed at the precinct. He didn't look shocked. He looked resigned. "We see this a lot," he said, tapping the paper showing the credit card application with my forged signature. "Family theft is the most common kind. It's also the hardest to prosecute because the victims usually recant. They don't want to send their son to jail." "I'm not recanting," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. "And I'm not the only victim. He sold my parents' home without their knowledge using a fraudulent power of attorney. He's draining their pension." Miller nodded. "That bumps it up to elder abuse and grand larceny. If we go pick him up, Ms. Last Name, there's no turning back. The DA will pick this up regardless of what your parents want once the arrest is made." "Do it," I said. "He's at Mercy General, room 402. "We'll meet you there," Miller said. The drive back to the hospital felt like a funeral procession for the brother I used to know. I tried to remember a time when Michael was just a big brother, before the greed, before the entitlement. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike. I remembered him protecting me from a bully in 3rd grade. But those memories felt like they belonged to different people. The man in room 402 wasn't my protector. He was a parasite. When I reached the 4th floor, the atmosphere had shifted. The nurses were whispering near the station. I walked past them, my heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum, a countdown clock. I pushed open the door to room 402. The scene inside was almost theatrical in its cruelty. Dad was awake, groggy, propped up on pillows, looking pale and fragile. Susan was sitting by his side, holding his hand. And Michael was standing over them, holding a clipboard and a pen. "It's just a standard release form, Dad," Michael was saying, his voice smooth, soothing. "Just so I can talk to the insurance company directly and get this bill sorted. You don't want Mom to have to worry about the paperwork, do you? Just sign here." Robert's hand was shaking as he reached for the pen. "Don't sign it," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped the room cold. Robert's hand froze. Michael spun around, his eyes wide. "Eva," Michael said, a tight, fake smile plastering onto his face. "I was just helping Dad with the admin work. You know how confusing these forms are." I walked into the room, closing the door behind me. I didn't look at my parents. I stared straight at Michael. "Let me see it," I said. "It's just insurance." I snatched the clipboard from his hand. I didn't need a law degree to recognize the document. It wasn't a medical release. It was a transfer authorization for a retirement annuity. He was trying to drain the last thing they had left, the monthly pension checks. "You are unbelievable," I whispered, the paper trembling in my hand. "He just had open-heart surgery, and you're trying to rob him before the anesthesia wears off." "Give that back." Michael lunged for the clipboard, but I stepped back. "What is going on?" Robert rasped, his voice weak. "Eva, Michael." I turned to my father. He looked so small. The man who had lectured me on grit, on hard work, on earning my keep. He looked at me with confusion and, for the first time, fear. "Dad," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "Michael isn't here to help you. He's here to finish what he started." "Eva, stop it," Susan cried out, standing up. "Not here, not now." "Yes, here, yes, now," I snapped, turning to her. "Because if I wait another hour, you'll be homeless and destitute." I reached into my bag and pulled out the file Detective Miller had given me copies of. I threw them onto the bed, covering Robert's legs in a blanket of evidence. "Look at it," I commanded. "Look at the deed to this house. Look at the date. July, you don't own your home, Dad. Michael sold it to a shell company he owns 6 months ago. He took the equity, $300,000, and blew it." "Liar," Michael screamed. "She's lying, she's trying to tear us apart." "Look at the credit cards," I shouted over him, pointing at the papers. 3 cards in my name, maxed out, $45,000. He stole my identity, Dad. He stole your house. and right now he was trying to get you to sign over your pension. Robert picked up the deed with a trembling hand. He squinted at it, his eyes adjusting. He saw his signature. A signature he clearly didn't remember giving. I never signed this, Robert whispered. I never sold the house. You signed a power of attorney when you were sick with the flu last year, I said gently. He told you it was for medical proxy. He used it to sell the house to himself. Michael was backing away toward the door, his face a mask of panic. It was an investment strategy. I was going to buy it back. You don't understand business, Dad. I was doing it for us. For us, Robert said, his voice gaining a sudden, terrible strength. You sold my house, the house I built. I had to, Michael yelled, the facade finally cracking. I needed the capital. I'm this close to a breakthrough. Why can't you people just support me? Why is it always about what I take? I deserve a chance. You had chances, I screamed, the anger finally exploding out of me. You had every chance. They gave you everything. They gave you their savings. They gave you a car. They gave you a safety net so thick you never had to touch the ground. And what did I get? I got a lecture. I got told to walk in the rain, and you stole from me anyway. Because you have enough, Michael spat, his eyes wild with entitlement. You sit in your penthouse and judge me. You owe me. You owe this family. I don't owe you a damn thing, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. And neither do they, not anymore. The door behind me opened. Michael turned, expecting a nurse. Instead, he saw two uniformed officers and Detective Miller. The silence in the room was absolute. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed to grow louder, filling the space between heartbeats. Michael last name, Detective Miller asked. Michael looked at the police, then at Mom, then at Dad. He looked like a cornered rat. Mom, he whimpered. Mom, tell them it's a mistake. Susan stood there, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the papers on the bed. She looked at her husband, whose face had turned a shade of gray I had never seen before, the gray of total, devastating heartbreak. Mom, Michael screamed, don't let them take me. Susan took a breath. She looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw her actually look at me. Not as the backup plan, not as the scapegoat, but as the only person in the room telling the truth. She turned back to Michael. You sold the house, she whispered. Mom, please. Officer, Robert said. His voice was weak, but it was clear. He didn't look at his son. He looked at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. Please remove him. Dad, Michael shrieked as the officers stepped forward. Dad, no, I'm your son, I'm your son. They cuffed him. The sound of the metal ratcheting shut was the loudest sound in the world. Michael fought them, screaming obscenities, screaming that I was a witch, that I was jealous, that I had ruined everything. They dragged him out into the hallway. The door swung shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood there, shaking. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt like I had just cut off a limb to save the body. Robert slowly lowered the papers. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with a shame so deep it was painful to witness. Eva, he choked out. It's okay, I said softly, though it wasn't. He can't hurt you anymore. I told you, Robert's voice cracked. I told you to work, I told you, character. I know, Dad, I said. I was wrong, he whispered, closing his eyes as the tears fell freely. I was so wrong, about everything. I walked over to the bed. I didn't hug him, we weren't that kind of family. But I placed my hand on his, just for a moment. Focus on getting better, Dad, I said. We have a lot of mess to clean up. The fallout was slow, painful, and expensive. Michael was denied bail. The flight risk was too high, given his history of fraud and the fact that he had access to hidden crypto wallets he refused to disclose. He was facing 10 to 15 years. The golden child was now inmate 8940. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was the reality check that hit my parents. They were evicted. The LLC that Michael had sold the house to had defaulted on the mortgage payments. Michael hadn't paid the bank, either, and the bank foreclosed. My parents had 30 days to leave the home they had lived in for 40 years. Mila, predictably, was useless. When the money stopped flowing, she stopped visiting. She accused me of being cruel for sending Michael to jail and moved in with a boyfriend 2 states away. She didn't come to help pack boxes. I did. I took a week off work, my first vacation in 4 years. I stood in my childhood living room, packing up the porcelain figurines Susan loved, the books Robert had collected. "Where will we go?" Susan asked me on the 3rd day. She was sitting on a box, looking lost. "We can't afford an apartment. Our credit is ruined because of the cosign loans." I taped up a box of kitchenware. I had thought a lot about this. I had wrestled with the guilt, the anger, and the old desire to buy their love. I could have bought them a house. I could have paid off their debts. I had the money. But I remembered the 20-year-old girl walking in the rain. I remembered the lessons they claimed to value. If I laid them out now, fully and completely, the cycle would never end. They would never respect me. They would just use me as the new Michael. "I found a place," I said. "It's a senior living community about 20 minutes from here. It's income-based. It's small, a 1-bedroom, but it's clean and safe." Susan looked at me, her eyes widening. "A 1-bedroom for both of us, but, Eva, you have that beautiful penthouse. Surely you could." "No," I cut her off gently but firmly. "I am not buying you a house, Mom, and you are not moving in with me." "But..." "I paid the deposit for the apartment," I continued. "And I paid the movers. I also hired a lawyer to help Dad file for bankruptcy to clear the debts Michael saddled you with. That is what I am doing. The rest you have to figure out." She looked at me shocked. "Eva, we are your parents." "I know," I said. "And for 30 years you taught me that handouts cripple people. You taught me that everyone has to stand on their own 2 feet. You were right." I walked over to her and crouched down so we were eye to eye. "I love you," I said, "but I am not your retirement plan. I am not Michael. I won't let you drown, but I won't carry you either." Robert walked into the room then. He was moving slow, using a cane, but he looked better. He had heard the conversation. He looked at Susan, then at me. "She's right, Susan," he said, his voice gruff. "Robert," Susan gasped. "We made this mess," Robert said, looking around the empty room. "We spoiled that boy until he rotted, and we ignored the one child who actually listened to us." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "The apartment sounds fine, Eva. Thank you. Thank you for the deposit. We will pay you back." "I know you will, Dad," I said. "Take your time." The day they moved in, I helped them unpack. The apartment was tiny compared to their old house, but it was warm. When we were finished, I handed them a set of keys. "I have to go back to the city tomorrow," I said. "I have a meeting on Tuesday." "Eva," Susan said, grabbing my hand at the door, "will you come back for Christmas?" I hesitated. The old resentment was still there, a scar that would ache when it rained. But the infection was gone. The poison had been cut out. "I'll check my calendar," I said honestly, "but probably." I walked out to my rental car. As I drove away, leaving the small apartment complex behind, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for a decade. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was Eva. I was the senior operations director. I was the woman who had walked through the rain and built a castle. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mila. "Can I borrow $500? My boyfriend kicked me out." I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I smiled. I blocked the number. I turned onto the highway, the city's skyline rising in the distance, shining like gold in the setting sun. I turned up the radio, pressed down on the accelerator, and drove home.